Wealth, fame, power. Once there was a man who took everything in this world. The words he said on the verge of death drove people to the sea. He told everyone his treasure was left behind, which is Joy Boy's treasure, as the world ushered in the Great Pirate Era. In my opinion, Roger was more impactful than Rocks and Joy Boy and Davy Jones, who in all honesty tried to make more change than Goldie Roger. The same way Luffy will surpass Roger himself, which is the base of the One Piece story. And Luffy, just like Roger, does not really care about making change. It is more so living life, going with the flow, and causing impact and change by accident. So today we do a deep dive on the first ever chapter of One Piece. You guys all know we are currently in Elbaf, so it's going to be quite interesting to see the difference in perspective of seeing the chapter, analyzing chapter 1 from the beginning when we didn't know nothing to now knowing everything. And make sure you guys like the video and subscribe to the channel. The beginning of chapter 1 showcases Romance Dawn, the title for the first ever chapter of One Piece. We see Monkey D. Luffy, we see Red Hair Shanks, we see Yasopp the sniper, Usopp's father, we see Lucky Roo, the left hand of Shanks, we see Nami, we know was a navigator and kind of like the third crewmate after Zoro, and then we have also no Beckman and no Zoro. Obviously Oda wants to build up these characters. These are the vice captain, the aura farming characters, so you can't just show them in the cover story, the title of the One Piece series, Romance Dawn. The first thing we learn in the first ever chapter of One Piece is Shanks stayed on a small peaceful village for 1 year. Now this is a big deal because we know Shanks did a lot of things in his life beforehand. When he was a baby, he was on God Valley. When he was growing up, he was with the Pirate King crew. He didn't get to Laughdale, but after Roger came back, he cried after Roger told him something probably about the Celestial Dragons and whatnot on his origins, and he got his own crew, the Red Hair Pirates, that would later become Yonko, but not before this, of course, chapter 1. And the biggest thing is him going back to the Holy Land, getting scarred by Blackbeard, so many major events, talking to Harold. Yes, this all, even fighting Harold, happened before chapter 1 in One Piece. Insanity. I also love how Shanks is encouraging Luffy, who ends up scarring himself, and it makes me think back on Garp and how he has that epic scar on his face, which with Luffy with this scar makes him look exactly like Monkey D. Garp as a youngin'. And then of course we also have Shanks with his facial scars, the 3 scars. This is probably the inspiration of why Luffy wanted to scar himself. He's like, yo, my grandfather who's incredibly powerful and Shanks who's incredibly powerful, these guys have scars on their face, so if I want to be legit, let me have a scar on my face. Now the next scar that Luffy would get during Marineford would not be something he would be happy about it. He would actually be in pain every single time he thinks about it. Yeah, this man who scarred him killed his brother Ace. I also love how the Red Hair Pirates are drinking to Luffy's craziness. You have to understand, they know their captain is also Crazy Shanks, so I love that scene right there. And Luffy moving like a samurai, saying it didn't even hurt him. That kind of reminded me of Kinemon and the Wano Samurai. Felt like Oda was definitely putting ties to Kozuki Yoden, who we know is connected to Shanks. And Luffy says he doesn't care about the pain. It makes me think, does this connect to Kuma, Zoro, Thriller Bark? Seeing all the pain that Luffy accumulated and then Zoro taking Luffy's pain and all the damage it did. He was still damaged from Thriller Bark all the way to the time skip, guys. So Luffy is enduring a lot of pain. Of course, his Delph Fruit helps, but still, pain is pain at the end of the day. We also know Blackbeard takes double the pain with his Yami Yami no Mi. I think pain is definitely a big theme in the One Piece story, and I think for chapter 1 definitely does show hints to it. Now we know Shanks also says, Luffy, you can't swim, and this is a big reason why he wouldn't let Luffy join his crew. And it makes sense after we look at what we learned 1,000+ chapters later. The Roger Pirates had no man who couldn't swim. They were mostly hockey experts like Shanks, but also the only man that was actually on the crew that definitely couldn't swim was Buggy, a Delphin user, but Shanks still asked him to join. Now it makes me think, is this going to be a big deal? Maybe Luffy not being able to swim is not because he just didn't know how to swim. Maybe he already had a Delphin before he ate the Nika fruit. The two Delphin theory of Luffy could make sense because Blackbeard has 2 Delphin fruits, and he did say his punch is as strong as a pistol, though I do think that's kind of a reach, honestly. I also love how Bonko Punch, one of the Red Hair Pirates' top officers, says Luffy seems unhappy. And then we also see Yasopp, of course, one of the top young commanders, saying be happy to Luffy. We know that he has a son, that's Usopp, that joins Luffy's crew, and be happy to face anything is what Yasopp says specifically. Lucky Roo, who's probably one of the strongest Red Hair Pirates after Shanks and Beckman, says a pirate life's great, And we know that Lucky Roo's always loved Luffy since Marineford, where he told Shanks, hey, do you want to see him? Even Wano, he's kind of begging Shanks to see him. So we know Lucky Roo's always had a love for Luffy. And Shanks tells them, don't give him any dumb ideas. So Shanks really doesn't want Luffy to get any dumb ideas. It's funny how Garp is so mad at Shanks inspiring Luffy, but Shanks didn't even want to inspire Luffy. It was kind of an accident. And I also want to say Lucky Roo and Yasop say, but it's the truth, is pretty funny. And I also want to talk about how Nika and Happiness and the first pirate, Joy Boy, the name is literally Joy Boy. So this is actually a big theme since chapter 1 that definitely needs to be highlighted as well. Now Shanks eventually tells Luffy, you're too young and you need another 10 years. We know that Oden had this prophecy, of course, that would be 20 years later of all these pirates going into the new world. And Roger, learning the truth after Laughter, knew that he was too early. But then some people like to argue Shanks was a pirate from the day he was born, from birth. And maybe Shanks just wants Luffy to have a different path than him. Whatever you guys want to say, I feel like there's definitely is some big connections to what we know already in the One Piece story in the beginning of chapter 1. Ben Beckman, being the first mate, the first ever crewmate of the Red Hair Pirates, tells Luffy to understand Shanks' feeling. Of course, Shanks knows the pirate life more than anyone, knows how hard and dangerous it is. He was literally a pirate since he was a baby, and says he doesn't purposely tease your ambition of becoming a pirate. Don't forget, Ben Beckman knows Shanks was raised with Roger, Rayleigh, Gabon, and Oden, monsters of the pirate world, the greatest crew. If anyone knows pirate life, it's Shanks. I also like how Oda ties in the end of One Piece. Luffy changing the world will be kind of him paying back the treasure that he said Makino is pretty much waiting for, because he did say, I'm going to pay you back when I get my treasure. And of course, we know that the One Piece treasure is not going to be like gold or anything like that. So I do think the change that Nika does is going to be him paying back Makino. Even though Makino doesn't even care about Luffy paying back, I think it is symbolic. It is a theme that definitely needs to be explored at the end of One Piece. I also want to say this, chapter 1 definitely is a good way to highlight Shanks' pirate career. Shanks tells Luffy he's going to the North Blue after leaving Luffy's hometown. And you have to understand, I wonder if Oda will show Shanks leaving in a Shanks flashback with the Red Hair Pirates, because what the North Blue is not a regular sea. We know that Nolan's from the North Blue. We know that Sanji's from the North Blue. The North Blue is more of a big deal than people like to admit. Law's from the North Blue as well. I think Oda definitely should show Shanks' journey in the North Blue and what he saw there and how it connects to the end of the story. We start to get to the point of the chapter where Shanks gets violated by these mountain bandits, and it's because he's too nice. That's the reason why he got violated. But I also believe this is how he's gonna die at the end of the One Piece story. I think Oda definitely likes to do foreshadowing. Also, Luffy eating the Nika fruit in the beginning of One Piece. He was Joy Boy from the very moment chapter 1 began. And of course, then Ben Beckman always being on go mode. I think Ben Beckman will have a savage moment in the end of One Piece. And we know 2026, we're probably gonna see the Red Hair Pirates fight. So Film Red was kind of like the teaser, but we're going to see some interesting fights against the Blackbeard Pirates. I also think Chapter 1 likes to highlight that Luffy wasn't the only one who was Joy Boy in Chapter 1. Shanks was also Joy Boy because he held the Straw Hat. And him not fighting back is definitely a theme that needs to be explored during the Void Century. And I think also him giving the Straw Hat to Luffy is kind of like him giving the Joy Boy title to Luffy. We do see Luffy do the same thing against Bellamy, so we see the chapter 1 impact stay strong 200 chapters later. We also see a moment of Shanks laughing it off, but Luffy is just irate in the Red Hair Pirates and Shanks laugh it off. But I think the funny thing is now, looking at how Luffy fights with Gear 5, he's laughing in every battle exchange with the Nika fruit. It's like Oda likes to tie in chapter 1 to every impactful moment that happens in the final saga. I also find it pretty cool how Shanks is shocked to see Luffy's arm stretching. We do know that Shanks goes on a mission to find that Nika fruit, and we do know that he knows about the Great One. We know the Great One fears Nika. Even Lucky Roo was tripping that Luffy ate that dolphin, meaning he knows how important that power is. And I feel like the fact that they stole from Who's Who, the fact that it was after Shanks being a Holy Knight, it's all going to be connected to Chapter 1. Chapter 1 is going to get a flashback when Shanks exposes what he learned about the Great One, the Nika, and the origins and whatnot. I also have to mention Luffy becomes more happier like Nika after he eats the Nika Del fruit. It's not a coincidence. And Whoopslap said don't become a pirate to Luffy. This is the same guy who knows Garp's greatness and Dragon's greatness as well, and talked about Luffy's destiny. So a lot of things he says, don't take it for face value. There's deeper meaning to Whoopslap as a character. We also got to talk about how in the chapter It actually gets teased and confirmed later on, but teased in this moment where Luffy pretty much fights the bandits because they made fun of Shanks. And Elbaf has Eustace Kid, Loki, Shamrock, and Garling. Yo, these four guys could easily insult Shanks to greater levels. And even Imu as well, because Imu's the great one. All have potential to trigger Luffy the same way. Even Blackbeard, if Blackbeard kills Shanks, that's going to trigger Luffy to the fullest. And Blackbeard already has beef with Luffy because of Ace. I also want to mention, imagine if Shanks teleporting during this chapter 1 was because of the Holy Knight tech he gained when he was infiltrating the Holy Land. Shanks is the first ever character to catch a body through Lucky Roo. I know Lucky Roo is the one who pulls the trigger, but Shanks is the one who talks about it. If you're going to point a gun, make sure you're willing to die. And I also want to talk about how this is the same about the Kid Pirates being destroyed through Dory and Broggy. Yes, it was Dory and Broggy, but we do know Shanks is the one that kind of pulled the trigger. And I feel like this is why Shanks has that real pirate blood in him, kind of like his father Goldie Roger and the Roger Pirates. Also, the fact that he has future sight, I believe all these destruction is because of his future sight. We see him use it against Eustace Kid and the Kid Pirates. I think he used it against this moment with the bandits as well. And I love how Ben Beckman rides out and says, "You calling us dirty? Did you think we were saints?" This is obviously a reference to Saint Shanks Garling and his family of saints and celestial dragons. And we know pirates are historically savages, but the celestial dragon saints are the one who actually are savages. So there's a lot of deep meanings in Ben Beckman saying this. I also like how Shanks says, "Don't mess with my friends." The same trait as his Captain Roger and Luffy. I think Joy Boy would be like this as well during the 4th century, as he's the leader of the Willie D. I think he protected a lot of Willie D members, including Davy Jones. I also think chapter 1 is definitely foreshadowing to how strong Ben Beckman is. He destroyed the bandits without even pulling a trigger or using his fist, just the barrel of the gun, and said, "You need a fleet of Marines to back you up." Kind of like how Marineford and how all those fleets of Marines against Whitebeard, the world's strongest man. Also, I say this is the same man who took Eustace Kid's arm. And lastly, Shanks talking about the rewards on the bandit's head was pretty cool. It's kind of like a reference to Kid too as well, who had the road poneglyphs and Shanks wanted them after the fight. So yeah, I think this is a really cool highlighting moment of how strong Ben Beckman is. We know it was already mentioned how Ben Beckman, Lucky Roo, and Yasop are incredibly powerful when it comes to top young commanders compared to the Beast Pirates, the Big Mom Pirates, and Blackbeard's crew. Shanks' top young commanders were the strongest. We've seen Roger and Luffy's traits and Shanks when he panicked after ore farming. And it's pretty funny how Ben Beckman's just laughing at Shanks. Lucky Roo said, "Calm down, these are his wings." Ben Beckman laughing at him and Lucky Roo calming him down. And we've seen Sanji calm down Luffy in many moments, so definitely cool to see. Remember when Ben Beckman said Kid is furious and Lucky Roo said, "Rich coming from you"? They have that wing banter we seen in Naked Island, and I think it's going to get explored more even during Elbaf, maybe even after Elbaf too, as the Blackbeard Pirates fight starts. Lucky Roo and Ben Beckman trolling each other is going to be so cool, especially chapter 1 and seeing the hints of it. I also found it super cool how Luffy's love for Shanks was shown in this chapter 1. So Zoro, relax. I know you're getting annoyed during Elbaf, but Luffy has been the same. He has never changed. He's been who he is since a kid. Again, I want to highlight Shanks teleporting is using Imu's powers. Of course, we all know that people believe it's connected to his arm, and during this chapter 1, majority of the time, Shanks had that arm with the tattoo, and I believe this teleporting thing he's doing is because of Imu. Again, chapter 1, Shanks is the first character to use Conqueror's Haki, and it makes sense why he's known as the strongest Haki user in the One Piece story currently, what he was able to do with Divine Departure, Future Sight, and against Green Bull and Admiral. Plus, look how powerful Conqueror's Haki is against the Holy Knights and Imu. And of course, Dom Reversi. So yeah, Haki and the mass of it all, Shanks being the first one to use it in chapter 1 is a cool treat. And Shanks was really happy to see Luffy riding out for him, even though Luffy wasn't that strong, and riding out for the red-haired pirates in general. But he risked his arm with that tattoo gone. I don't think it was the biggest risk now. I also found it super cool how Shanks was enjoying Luffy riding out for him and the red-haired pirates, even though Luffy wasn't that strong. And the risk he took for Luffy definitely makes me look at it differently because of that tattoo on his arm. Maybe he gave it up willingly because he didn't want Imu and the radius power he had on him to be existing. But only time will tell if it's truly gone. Maybe Imu still could control Shanks if he's around him, which will just be a crazy plot twist. I also found it super cool in chapter 1 towards the end. Luffy stops trying to be on the red hair pirate crew and decides to get his own crew that's stronger and can find the biggest treasure, the One Piece. Even though both haven't done it yet, the fact that they're both in this race with the road poneglyphs I think it's super cool. I think the Straw Hat Pirates and the Red Hair Pirates should meet, and Luffy with his crew, and Shanks with his crew. And the Red Hair Pirates top officer saying, yo, Luffy actually did it, yo. He actually has a Yonko crew that could become Pirate King. And Shanks said it, you want to become bigger than us and the Pirate King? Then take this straw hat that belonged to Roger and Joy Boy as a gift. That is one of the biggest references to Luffy's strength. This straw hat and its meaning and its symbolic meaning. Even seeing Imu staring at a huge straw hat just shows you what Shanks was doing when giving the straw hat to Kid Luffy. Shanks then says return when you become a great pirate, and Beckman predicts he'll be big in the future. Both are right, and Shanks says, I know, it reminds me of myself in my early years. He was the child of destiny. This was before Roger made him cry. We know he was the only one to actually mimic Roger's tech, divine departure and whatnot. I do believe Luffy and Shanks were similar as kids, but I do think they're kind of polar opposites at the same time. I think Shanks is more logical, while Luffy's more of a battle genius and strategic. So I think they do have differences. I think Shanks and Roger have differences and similarities, and same as Luffy and Roger. We then see Luffy 10 years later defeating the Sea King that Shanks, of course, gave his arm up to and used Conqueror's Haki on. And he punched it like he punched all his enemies up until Kaido. And of course, he did find a crew of 10. Well, after Elbaf will be 10 if Loki joins, so it's potentially 10. So Luffy is on the path of what he was stating in chapter 1. And Luffy said he's going to become king of the pirates, which to me highlights Roger's impact and how it's greater than pretty much all, including Shanks, Joy Boy, Rocks, Dave G. Jones, and whoever you want to name. And I think that's the perfect way to end chapter 1. It's Luffy's story and the impact of Gold D. Roger, which was the first ever page in the chapter. So what are my thoughts on chapter 1? I think chapter 1 really is endgame One Piece. What I mean by that is I believe Shanks, Luffy, Roger are going to be highlighted at the end of One Piece story. The Straw Hat as well. The Nika Fruit is a big thing too as well. We already know that Imu, the Void Sentry flashback, and Loki, and all the lore we're getting in Elbaf, and after when we get to Laugh Tale and the end of the war with the Marines and whatnot, even Marines being mentioned. There's so many little gems in chapter 1 that definitely highlight the end game. And Oda always said he knew the beginning of One Piece and he knew the end of One Piece. The rest is just him filling it out, the story. So I think he did a great job in chapter 1, because as reading it on chapter 1170-ish area, yeah, the chapter 1 definitely stands strong even till today in 2026.